Hi, I'm Steven Crowder, and I'm taking over Milo's channel. I paid him a large sum of cash. It was actually just ring-dings and Cheez-Its. He's a cheap man to acquire. If you like this interview, go over to my channel, click this box where there's actually a full 35-minute interview that was broadcast on my terrestrial radio show, podcast, and of course on my YouTube channel, more specific to Gamergate and the controversy surrounding thereof. This one you're about to watch is the extended cut that covers everything from Milo's attraction to black men to transgenderism. So enjoy. Why do you say that? I was talking with Andrew WK about that, and I have a theory, and you can tell me if you think I'm completely off base because you're clearly much more intelligent than I am. But people
no, it's just the accent.
It's just the accent.
Honestly, it's just the accent. If I was that smart, would I have done this to my hair? No. It's really. I know I look better with dark hair, but I do it anyway because I'm stupid. It's really just the accent.
Well, you can pull it off though. The hair, I couldn't pull it off because listen, I've talked about fat pride. I'm no small dude myself. I walk around about I'm 227 right now. Fun Dip, our producer, is a legit 400 pounds. He hates fat pride. Hates it.
How would he even have sex with a transsexual?
This is going to sound terrible. We got a sex book when we got married with our marriage counselor, and it's a great book, and it had a whole chapter on fat sex. And the soundbite that I remembered, again, the Oprah brain, was if you have a gut, rest it on her butt. And that stuck with me. Ooh, and think about it, though. It's a shelf.
It's not something I want to think about. It's not something I ever intend to introduce into my personal life.
You're not into the homo bears?
No.
It's a new candy coming out from Haribo, Homo Bears. So
Homo Bears, they sound delicious. They taste a little salty.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to have a toothpick.
Oh, God, well, we've all been there. No, I am not interested in pursuing fat sex as a hobby. Wow.
It's called hogging. Do you know about that phenomenon?
Oh, no, it's not. Tell me it's not.
It actually is. It's honestly
worse than furries. It's not. Is it called? It's called hogging.
Hogging is the specific activity.
You do noises with the hogging.
No. Hogging is you go into a bar and you have, with a group of guys, you try and find the biggest lady you can, and whoever, it's literally, I don't know if you get them on a scale afterward. I've never done it. I don't know. I don't know the official barometer, but I know whoever has the bit, it's like reeling in a fish.
So, oh God, it mystifies me so much. I mean, you and I, being sensible people, we know that because we're allowed to say what both science and common sense tells us without fear of being seen as sexist, that men are much more visual animals than women. And therefore, it matters a lot more whether a woman stays in shape than it does a man. Imagine how much worse that is when you've got sort of exclusively male meat market, which becomes almost entirely visual. This is the psychological process that's given rise to Grindr, right, where nothing matters but the torso shot. It's so much worse for homosexuals who are judged almost entirely on looks,
right?
Except when they get to about 30 or 40, if they're rich or famous. So I have to make a decision in the next sort of 2 to 3 years whether I'm going to start working out and hang on to hot for another 10 or 15 years, or if I'm just going to pick up the check. So either is possible. So.
Well, you can become the bear for someone else, even if you don't like the bears.
No, because then, of course, you have the whole politics of, who's daddy.
Okay.
I'm not going to gross you out with the details.
That's okay. It's funny, actually. Guy Benson, I don't know if you know, he just came out as gay, Fox News contributor. Yeah, see, you're in the UK. You guys are conservative, and you're not part of the political echo chamber that is here in the United States. But I realize, listen, I'm conservative. I'm a Christian conservative. I would probably be
guy.
The what?
I'm a Judge Genie kind of guy.
Oh, all right, okay. Listen, I would be considered more socially conservative than most libertarians, and I'd be considered more libertarian to most social conservatives. But
you're a conservatarian, like Charles Cook's book, right?
I don't know. I don't like the terms. I think it's a cop-out. I honestly think it's a cop-out. I think conservative is a big enough tent. I know enough conservatives who are socially liberal who don't claim libertarian, and when you have Greg Gutfeld, Glenn Beck, and Bill Maher who all claim to be libertarian, I think it's a meaningless term.
But you're describing two different axes. That none of those people is suggesting that libertarian places them on a social or economic right-left scale. What they're saying is that on the right-to-left axis, so there's that the one that goes up and down is authoritarian, libertarian, and they're situating themselves with that word in the bottom half of the the cube.
But the
they're not
cultural
really suggesting which. I mean, Bill Maher is a good libertarian. He's a perfect example of a sort of libertarian we should welcome and engage with and encourage, because he hates some of the absurdities of the left that lead, for example, feminists to support Islam over other women, right? Crazy nonsense about terrorism, because he's in the sort of libertarian left quadrant. I don't think there's anything contradictory in that.
No, I don't. I just mean, I think the cultural ramifications are the same enough that I don't identify as a libertarian, because people attribute more to that, whereas I go, hey, I'm a conservative, but let me explain to you what that means.
So I'm a conservative, but is the ultimate cop out. I mean, that's a way more spineless.
Well, no, I think it opens the door to be like, I don't think
we're already suggesting it's something to apologize for. I don't describe myself as a libertarian because I'm not one. I'm a conservative.
You are. You would consider yourself more socially conservative?
Yes, of course. Like, if I wasn't homosexual, I'd be a huge homophobe. I'm very.
Well, see, that's a bullshit term. The like, honestly, I can count the amount of people.
Well, who's scared of gays? We're harmless, I mean, of course.
There are a few. There are a few, like in the deep South. I'll go lynch some gays, but not many people. And the thing is, if it's an actual phobia, right? Is it like when I was a kid, I was deathly terrified of spiders? How do I get over it? Do I have to touch a gay man? Is that how I get over it?
I was told my whole life that I was going to experience homophobia, that it was going to be the worst thing that's ever going to happen to me, that that the left was going to protect me. I've never met a homophobe.
Well, they probably cut a wide swath.
Well, I'm sure, but I mean, I don't think I've ever met one. I don't think I've ever been anywhere where somebody has threatened, has wanted to hit me. I don't think it's ever cost me anything in business dealings. I just don't think I've ever met one. Now, granted, I run in fairly civilized circles, but if anything, there are plenty of socially conservative people in those circles who would have problems. I don't think I've ever met a sort of virulently homophobic person.
Well, that's why I say, because I would
think it's nonsense.
I would be on the list. I'd be socially conservative, pretty traditional marriage guy, would be a homophobe. And Guy Benson came out as gay, and I'm thinking, I guess it doesn't surprise me, because he slept on my couch when I lived in Chelsea with my gay roommate for 4 months. Right. And I was actually really good friends with his boyfriend. He was a nice guy. He was a total lefty. But I'm going to tell you, it never got comfortable hearing them go into their room and hearing the belt buckles hit the floor. That wasn't homophobia.
No, I'm not into all that. Although I have my own fetish. I'm a what do you call it? Miscegenation? Is that what the sort of American right has a well, actually no, it wasn't really. It was the Democrats, of course. The Democrats party of the KKK, right. Democrats party of Jim Crow, Democrats, party of the fake literacy tests to keep black people out of the polling station,
which they now compare to asking for a valid ID to vote. So.
Right, and it's sort of, that thing that you did, those fake literacy tests that you staged to keep black people out. Now what we're doing to ensure that people vote knowing a little bit about who the president is, at least,
just being a legal damn citizen.
Can write their own name and lives here and pays tax. That's somehow racist. What an extraordinary thing to claim. No, but I don't date whites, which I suppose puts me in the really sort of the ultimate conservative sin bin.
You only date black people?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it just meant any sort of generically ethnic. Like,
no, just that.
Are you talking like really black, or like Abercrombie black, where they're generic but they don't intimidate white people? Like, let's put them in skinny jeans and you decide.
I've never heard that before. That's an excellent expression, Abercrombie black. That's terrific. Sort of cafe au lait, unthreatening looking. No,
is he biracial? Is he Indonesian? It's up to you.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
The whole spectrum, really.
Oh, well, it's funny. Fundip
a little something from the dark continent, and I'm fine.
Well, Fundip and I were talking about this. He is, and I always ask him, I say, well, listen, is it racist? It's okay to like blondes. It's okay to redheads. It always gets into a little bit creepy territory, and Fundip is one of those guys. But then all of a sudden it becomes racist to say, I'm not particularly attracted to black women. Now, I've dated black women. A couple, actually. My wife is straight out of a page of Hitler Youth. I've dated all different kinds of women, whereas Fundip is not as attracted to black women. And we were
the survey stuff on this, right?
Well, I know there are, but it doesn't matter. You don't have time to quote them.
No. Well, in the bar, no, you don't.
No.
No, but what the surveys show is that black men are by a significant margin the most attractive group to every other ethnicity, and black women are by a significant margin the least attractive group to every other ethnicity. Now, there are some particular interracial fondnesses, like for example, black women and black men and Asian women, Asian being Oriental Far East women, love each other. So there are quite strong bonds there. But when OkCupid does their surveys about who gets their messages responded to, they can come out with quite clear data on which race, on the sort of race gender divide, who's hot and who's not. And black women fare very badly in those studies. It's remarkable. I mean, nobody really knows why.
Well, I feel bad for black women because they're getting the short end of the stick there. And then, I mean, quite literally. And then also I feel bad for Asian men because...
Yes, Asian men are also quite often overlooked. They don't tend to get a lot of their messages responded to. Women aren't particularly interested in them. I mean, for
black ones
women,
who are really are.
Well, I am something of a connoisseur on the science of redhead attraction, right? So I know
because you're from the UK. You have plenty of them.
Well, I know quite a lot
it's your
about
biggest export.
Why ginger people are considered unattractive, and there's a variety of reasons. Some of them are evolutionary, and some of them are cultural. And interestingly, if you're into one of those other groups that doesn't look like you, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a white guy who goes for something exotic, as I do, or if you are, if you're a guy who goes for redheads or whatever, your sensitivity to other things about that person goes down quite significantly. So if, for example, I'm a guy who's into redheaded women, I sort of don't care if she's carrying a bit of extra weight, and I sort of don't care as much what her face is like, provided she's got the red hair. So I've certainly noticed this in myself with black men. And men who are into redheads, for example, have this extraordinary thing. They sort of don't care what the redhead looks like.
That's always what I've said.
So the good news is, if you're redheaded, it is true that fewer people are going to be attracted to you. But the ones that are don't care what you look like.
Exactly.
So you can get fat, and you will always find people who want to fuck you. It's actually much better than being a normal person. I always imagine
with blondes and and brunettes, it's a preference. With blondes and brunettes, it's a preference. With redheads, it's a fetish.
It is a fetish, and if you have that fetish, it sort of doesn't matter what else the other parts of the package aren't so important.
Yeah, that's what Fundip loves. He loves anything Scottish, English, redhead. He's a Doctor Who fan. I got to tell you, man, I tried to get through Doctor Who, I couldn't do it.
Because of the redheads.
Well, that didn't help. It matters any, but I just couldn't do it. It was like watching just a terrible low-rent Canadian show. I couldn't do it.
The only things I've ever seen from Canada have been Canadian-American sci-fi series. So there's quite a lot of them, isn't there? Sort of Continuum and Stargate.
Was Stargate Canadian?
Yeah, Stargate. Well, Stargate the movie was American, but Stargate the series, both SG-1 and Atlantis are both Canadian-American. So that's why they have all these jokes in Atlantis with Rodney, the scientist, where he's, is it a ZPM or a ZPM? I'm such a dork. I'm sorry.
We have to get you on with Fundip. I wish I would have.
I'm sorry. I just realized what was happening there.
No. Go. The truth is,
to stop myself.
The reason I didn't have Fundip in is because every single conversation devolves into Star Trek or Doctor Who, and I was like, with a Brit. It's not going to be good.
I could talk for an hour about the virtues of Catherine Janeway, so it's a good job that he wasn't here.
We'll have you on. We need to actually, if we can get you across the pond, get it, and we'll tape it, get you, Fundip, and myself, we can go to Comic-Con. And
I would love to.
Oh my gosh. It's he's a weird cat, man. But yeah, I just knew this conversation would go nowhere because you're English, and now that I know you're a Trekker, I guess Trekkie's derogatory, right?
Very, very private, secret, shameful closet. I mean, look, I don't mind coming out as gay. I don't even mind much more difficult coming out as conservative. But coming out as a Trekkie is a step too far, even for me.
Well, Fundip has you beat. I sometimes I wonder how he's still alive. He punches every box that you possibly can that should earn him a firm ass beating every single day. Trekker, he's a big guy. He loves redheads, but then he's socially super liberal. He's a fun dude. But the point I was making was about, you were talking about how Gamergate and these sort of people, they love these long form conversations, right? And I will tell you this, in terrestrial radio, they thought this wasn't going to work, and people are going, well, this is new, it's fresh. It's really not that fresh compared to, I guess, sort of the podcasting phenomenon. But I have a theory about that. If you look back at, like the Steve Allen Show or the Marx Brothers or Jack Benny, who I think were obviously immensely talented and very entertaining shows, people went home, they ate their dinner at the table, and then they either sat by the radio or they watched television, right? So it was very show businessy. Hey, let me read you this list. See, sponsored by Colgate. Now they're not sitting around at the dinner table. There isn't as much human interaction because they're married to their device, that they want their entertainment to provide that human touch that they don't really get in their everyday life. You've seen them swap.
Yes, I think that's true, and I think it's why people like us are so popular, because we have what the left doesn't, which is a lightness of touch and humor and gaiety and sort of normal human connection with people. Able to speak about the things they care about and tell the truth about them, and not be racked with earnest, pearl-clutching, hand-wringing, anxiety about every sentence and every word, which normal people, of course, aren't. I think that's why you and I, in our respective worlds, are so popular, because we provide that for people in a world where the media is not doing it anymore, and maybe their family is not doing it so much. So yeah, no, I
Can you put to rest the myth of the BBC being this beacon of truth and light in news?
Oh, it's hideous. It's a monstrous engine of liberal chaos. The way they report on Israel-Palestine is disgusting. The problem isn't so much the interesting thing. The mistake people always make with the BBC is they say, well, they go looking for problems in the news coverage, and they're there to be found if you want to look for them. And on something like Israel-Palestine, no one's ever going to be happy. So the BBC can quite plausibly and reasonably say, well, everyone's pissed off at us, so we're probably doing okay. The problem with the BBC isn't so much the news coverage. The problem is in the drama and in the creative programming, the comedy, all the stuff that they put out on BBC 2 and 3 that young people watch, all of the dramas, all of the cultural programming around the news. That's where the real problem is. That's where the sort of incredible bias is. That's where the sort of deep-seated loathing and hatred of conservatives just seeps through in every scene. The news, BBC News, in many respects, does a very good job. I do have some problems with it, sort of.
Well, the government funding still creates a conflict. I mean, we have that in Canada with Radio Canada and CBC.
Don't get me wrong; I'm not sure it should exist, but since it does, there is at least, it does a reasonable job of reporting on most of the news. Whether or not it should do written articles on a website, that's not in the BBC's charter trust. There's no reason why they should do that. I find that anti-competitive. I think it creates a very hostile environment for private sector news organizations. It's very difficult to beat that because they have limitless resources. But the problem really isn't any of that. The problem is that
well, it's like NPR here in the States. Look at their podcasts. They have all these immensely popular podcasts. Right. They don't have any super popular radio shows compared to people like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck. And the reason they're the most successful podcast is because they have a never-ending supply of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I suppose the only thing that I do really love that they do was Car Talk. I still love old reruns of Car Talk, which I think is adorable and lovely. But of course, it's two old liberal professors joking, and the way that only men from the coasts can and do.
Right.
That for a very cerebral and very alienating humor for a lot of America, I would imagine. Yeah. I think it's great, but then I admit that I'm from that sort of world. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a similar problem at NPR, but the BBC drama is.
Who's that
BBC
guy?
Is what the problem is.
Who's that guy at BBC? I can't remember his name, but I was actually at Value Voters Summit, and I was like, they signed me up, and I was speaking. I'm like, you sure? You know what you're getting into? You want me to do stand up at Value Voters Summit? I'm like, yeah. I'm a Christian conservative, but do you understand how offensive I am? Like, yeah. We want you to come. So, of course, all of our media matters. And there was that guy there, the guy on whom Robert Downey Jr. walked out. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Krishnan Guru Murthy.
That's him. Well, because he was following me around like a puppy dog. He probably has 40 minutes. And he was asking me, and he kept asking me about the gay marriage questions. And what do you think about these people here at Value Voters?
I like him. He's a nice guy. No, well, okay, let me be clear. Personally, he seems like a nice enough person. I don't think he's an evil guy. But he's got this weird sort of lapdog, sort of slightly... I don't know what's wrong with him, but he sort of follows people around, sort of trying to get them to say something embarrassing, and always ends up looking like more of a dick himself.
Well, he didn't end up using any of the footage, and he actually interviewed me.
He wasted an enormous amount of time trying to get you to say something embarrassing, and only made himself look a bit pathetic. And he did this with Robert Downey Jr. That interview was awful, not because he was being a bastard, but because he was being so pathetic.
It was funny though.
Well, it was, but then I have to go on radio with you guys and say we're not all like this. I promise.
This is true.
we're not all like this in England. I promise.
Well, he didn't. he didn't only interview me. Then I went up to my room and he called me back down and said, hey, you know, we want to get some better shots. And I really thought, would you give me more time? And so then my wife came down with me. We had literally just gotten married and come back from our honeymoon. And, I kind of knew where he was going. Is he gay?
No, I don't think so, but I understand why you might think that.
Well, he was obsessive about the gay thing. It seemed like it was the only topic he could talk about. And maybe
well, I think it's very progressive. Channel 4 News is the most progressive news show we have. I mean, we don't have anything as crazy as Rachel Maddow, but Channel 4 News in the UK would be on MSNBC.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's where you can understand it. So he goes crazy on the social issues, the gay stuff and whatever, and the lead presenter Jon Snow is like sort of virulently anti-Israel.
I actually like Rachel Maddow. I'm not going to lie. I think she seems like a decent person, and I'd rather someone come out with their views than the sort of soft bias with someone like Anderson Cooper.
I much prefer when they're open about it. I much prefer when they're honest about it, and that is exactly the problem I have with Anderson Cooper. But then, of course, his politics isn't the only thing he has kept under wraps.
Well, it's funny. I can send you this tape. I did this bit 2-3 years before he came out of the closet at CPAC, and it was when remember GoProud. It was the first year they were being a donor or whatever, funding CPAC.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of some protest. And so I went up again. I was like, are you sure you want me to do stand-up at CPAC? Like, you know what you're getting. I was like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not Bill Bennett. I'm not going up and taking questions. Like, so I go right up, and my first bit was, all right, let's address the big gay elephant in the room. And people are already uncomfortable. And I talked about GoProud, and I sort of complimented them. And then I said, I said, a lot of, I can't remember what the bit was. It's been so long, but the punchline was, this is before anyone knew Anderson Cooper. Before he had written his little dainty book. I said, well, how gay are you? I said, I'm Anderson Cooper gay. I said, I'm not quite Rock Hudson playing doctor with Gomer Pyle gay, but I'm getting there. It was front page Media Matters, like Steven Crowder slanders, and like now we all know. But back then it was considered hate speech. And I didn't even make fun of it. I just said like, I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, but the only reason it's really upsetting to them is because he is in fact gay and everyone knew it for so long.
Right.
It would be funny if you'd said, I mean, I for example could, I don't know, I'm sort of Chris Matthews gay, or
right.
I'm Sean Hannity gay, because Sean Hannity is sort of camp in a way. He's got something of the sort of,
he's very well coiffed.
Yeah, and there's something of the sort of elderly antiques dealer about that, So
is that a gay thing, antiques?
Yeah. Is that a joke?
I know there's an actual phobia of antiques, more so than homophobia. There's a clinical phobia. Yeah, Billy Bob Thornton.
There is no clinical phobia of antiques. That's ridiculous. It's just attention seeking. And yes, of course, antiques are gay. How many straight people do you know that work in antique shops?
I don't know anybody who works in an antique shop.
Well, if you did, they would be gay.
Okay. That's fair. Probably not. I would imagine it goes the other way, where not many lesbians work in the antique shops.
No, I've always wondered about which there are not enough women working in tech. There aren't enough, blacks in this, whatever. I've always wanted to start a petition for heterosexuals on fragrance counters. Why aren't there more straight men selling perfume? It must be because of structural oppression and sort of society's prejudices about what roles men can take in society, mustn't it? Because after all, that's the explanation for all of the other absences in every other industry. So I've always quite liked the idea of doing some sort of campaign to get straight men onto fragrance counters, but you might have ideas for better ones than that.
I've never even, I would think of makeup artists, obviously working in the entertainment industry, but
there should be more straight makeup artists.
I found one.
Did you?
One.
Did you?
Yeah, one. I was very surprised. As a matter of fact, I was so surprised I didn't buy it for like the first few sessions. You know what I mean? I was
you're not really straight. You're just saying that so the other guys are going to want you more, right?
Yes.
We've all been there, right? As homosexuals, we've all played the straight. We all sort of tried to pretend to be straight for the first couple of days in a new job, just so that all of the other gays are like, oh, I really want to bang that. And then as soon as they find out you're gay, they're like, oh, okay, whatever, honey.
It is true. Hard to get, I would imagine, is pretty rare in the gay community, and I don't
exactly. When you manufacture exclusivity in homosexuals, I mean, it's like catnip. You just walk along the street, you got 50 of them behind you. It's great.
Well, and that's the thing. And of course, if I say it as a straight guy, you're my homo pass. You've heard of the hood pass. You're my homo pass here.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be a homo pass. I've probably said something worse already, so we're going to have a very happy, symbiotic relationship.
Well, again, lived with a gay guy for years. John Phillips, a good friend of mine. Well, actually, the rumor started circulating because I was with my roommate, and John Phillips, host at KBC LA, who is openly gay. And I went with them to a gay bar, and I was just hanging out because they were friends. And someone took a picture, and I went, Stephen Crowder at a gay bar. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm gay. You got me. Like, who cares? I mean, it wouldn't change anything about what I say or my point of view. And as a matter of fact, it probably would give me some credibility with the leftists who trying to, I thought like,
this is what I firmly believe, that God made me gay so that I could go for the jugular with feminists, and I've got cover. I firmly believe I was made a homosexual just as cover, just as an identity politics distraction, like a misdirection maneuver, just to throw them at the beginning. So they meet me and they're like, "Oh, it's this nice gay guy. He's going to be fine." And then I'm like, "If facts are wrong," I could stick up for straight guys in a way they could never stick up for themselves.
If you were in ancient Greece, you'd be the 12-year-old boy who just flexed and broke that right off.
Right.
Sorry, I took it to a very unhealthy place very quickly.
It's fine. It's fine. People call me a reactionary. They think that, they say I want to go back to the 1950s, and they're right. But I want to go back to 650 BC. I want to go back to Sparta. There's nothing that wasn't awesome about Sparta,
including super gay.
I'm including being super gay. But I'm fine. So I'm fine with ancient. How do you the joke? How do you separate Greek men from boys?
I don't know
with a crowbar. I know all of these. It's fine. You can go for it.
Oh, that is funny. Well, that's a point I make too, where we talk about same-sex marriage, right? And I talk about this a lot. And regardless of where you line up, there's something that people have to recognize. That they think of polygamy as this horrible crime against mankind. I'm going, okay, every single society since the beginning of time at some point has recognized polygamy. Almost every society.
Yeah.
But I don't want to speak in a generality that would be inaccurate there, because here's a statement, an absolute statement that is true. No society before the last 50 years ever recognized same-sex marriage. By the way, including the super gay societies like the Greeks. They were openly gay, but it wasn't a marriage.
True. Yes, that's true. That's true. And also, I think another interesting thing about that is lesbianism, I think, is as a sort of mass sexuality in society is a relatively modern phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It is true that classical authors tended to talk about men and male stuff, but they didn't shy away from talking about interesting things, when they occurred to women. And you can't tell me that Suetonius or Juvenal wouldn't have spoken about lesbianism if it had been as big a thing as male homosexuality. I don't think it was. And when you start to factor in how much more malleable and socially determined female sexuality is, and I'll send you my piece about lesbian domestic violence, which touches on this as well, why women have relationships with women, and it's not really because they're lesbians. You start to realize that actually some of what the religious right says does make some sense when it comes to lesbians. It is certainly true that if you present a particular kind of lifestyle as being a happy, valid lifestyle choice, an alternative to a relationship with a man, perhaps to a woman who's had a bad, has been knocked around or just had bad experiences with men, and go to try out lesbianism instead. That's how female sexuality works, at least more so than male. Mm-hmm. So there is some truth in what the right says about promoting certain kinds of lifestyles. Born this way, the idea that there's a gay gene, the idea that everybody's simply born into their sexuality, is a PR. It's a lie. It's a con. There's no basis in science whatsoever. It was a PR move dreamt up by the gay lobby in the 80s to get around the religious right, who said that being gay was a wicked lifestyle choice. And so the gay lobby responded with, actually, we were born that way. There's nothing we can do about it. What's your answer now? And and religion hasn't really come up with a response to that. So it was a very effective strategy, but it was a PR strategy with no basis in science whatsoever.
Well, we actually have a video going up today on that, where I talked about that from a Christian perspective. And this is what I said, and I'll send it to you. It's actually, since this is a pre-tape, it's going up tonight. I talked about this with Fun Dip because I do honestly, having a lot of gay friends, and everybody goes, "Oh, you're trying to say you're not a homophobe." Well, listen, I have had just a lot of gay friends.
Some of my best friends are gay.
Right, but it's by the way, the fact that it's a commonly used argument doesn't make it any more invalid. If someone does have a lot of black friends or gay friends,
argument. If you have a lot of gay friends, that suggests you're probably not a homophobe. It's a perfect, reasonable argument.
I know, but again, the left just goes, "Well, we're going to say that's homophobic." What do you say to that now? My point was this. So you have the transgender movement now, where you have complete and total choice over your gender. And, of course, you have no choice at all over your sexual actions. The argument I've not heard a lot of Christians, by the way, I've not heard many Christians say, you choose to be gay. I mean, I don't think they believe you choose, wiener isn't just something you try.
No, but they used to. They used to,
but I've not met people in my generation. Now, that being said, I've also written about abstinence, about waiting until I was married. I was someone who was kind of a whore in high school, and then I decided I didn't want to be a hypocrite anymore. So I wrote about that, got all kinds of flack, ironically enough, from feminists, where I talked about respecting my wife and trying to honor our commitment. So I do believe that everyone has choice over their sexual actions, in the sense that my instinct is to have sex with anything that moves and is attractive to me. That's my instinct as a male. It's the way I'm biologically hardwired. So I don't think that people say you choose to be gay. I do think that Christians, obviously, if they believe in biblical teachings, and then you can get into theology, say, okay, we believe that any sex outside of marriage between a man and a woman is immoral, and that people have choice over their sexual actions. Now, they have made, I think, in a way, an unfair commotion about that sin, because I don't think it's any more immoral than the fact that I have a proclivity toward being angry quickly. I have a proclivity toward gluttony with food. Everyone has their proclivities. Everyone has certain instincts. Everyone has different personalities. And I do think, based on my experience, that people are born with a certain, gravitational pull towards being gay. And I address it as anything else that, if Christians want to say, hey, we believe that's immoral, that's a discussion to have, but don't make it seem like it's any more abnormal than someone who maybe suffers from depression or, has a proclivity towards an addictive personality.
Yeah. Here's one last thing before we wrap up, because I'm going to have to love you and leave you.
You're the one who wanted to go long.
I know. I'm sorry. I've just got a call from my person. Here's an interesting thing for you to think about.
Yeah.
I have a theory that gay emancipation has made society more stupid. And the reason is as follows.
That's the lead.
Yeah. Gay society, I haven't written this up yet, actually, so you can't steal this, so I'm going to write it up at some point.
I shan't.
The reasoning goes something like this. We know that IQ, which for all its faults is still the best measure of intelligence that we have, it's probably the best indicator of future success, and it's a pretty good indicator of whether somebody will perform well in a globalized information economy. It's not a terrible measure of intelligence, right? Is at least 60 to 80% heritable. We also know that gay people, men who identify as homosexual for the majority or for all of their lives, test significantly higher than the rest of the population for IQ. Nobody knows why. We don't know if being gay makes you smarter or being smarter makes you gay, or whether they're just gene clusters that tend to occur together. But what used to happen in the 50s is that gay men would get married, have kids, and then have a double life. They would live their dirty, nocturnal, alternative existence, and they would play house. They would have play happy families during the day. That doesn't happen anymore. What's happened in really the space of just 2 generations is that between 2 and 5% of the smartest men aren't breeding anymore, because they tend to adopt or they tend to have kids from other places. They don't tend to have their own genetic children anymore. And if you believe the upper limit estimates of homosexuality in the population was 4%, something like that, you bear in mind that most women breed, but most men don't. It's quite a significant impact on the hereditary IQ that's moving from generation to generation. And it's one of the many ways in which gay emancipation is, most people would agree, is probably a good thing in most respects. But the fact that gays are now able to, that are liberated and able to live their lives freely and openly, means they breed less now. And as a result, there are a lot fewer of the smartest men having children.
That is interesting. But it isn't really relevant to what you were saying before. You said you don't believe that someone is born gay, a gay gene. So what, I guess...
No, well, I'm saying we don't know what these clusters of genetic material and predisposition are like. I mean, obviously IQ is only 60 to 80% heritable, because it's a combination of sort of predilections, predispositions, and education. There's a literacy component in IQ tests, which is only possible to score well at if you've had a good education.
Right.
Homosexuality is almost certainly very similar, probably 60 to 80% heritable, and the rest is nurture.
2 things that I find very interesting about that, and then I will let you go. One, the studies. I don't know if you've seen these studies. this is not going to make a lot of people happy, that men on average have about a 4-point higher IQ than women. That is definitive, which I find interesting if you're talking about more gay men have.
Okay, we'll talk about that because that's not quite right. But carry on.
Well, it was. Well, it is quite right. I've actually been reading on it quite a bit this week.
It's better and worse than that. But carry on.
Okay.
Carry on.
Well, you know the study I'm talking about, then, that was pretty extensive. That it's not just some guy going, nothing guys are smarter than women because bitches are stupid. It was a guy who set out to prove it wrong. That, which would be interesting, I think, to a lot of people, considering if you're talking about a higher than average IQ among gay men, where people would say they act more feminine than men. And then also completely redundant, my apologies, there was something else that you said, and it prompted something, and I can't remember what it was. Something about women, gay, double life. I don't know. The problem is you speak so much. But then by the end of it, I forget what it was that you had first said. But
it's my debate strategy. You see, you just lay down machine gun fire, and by the end of it, people are just like,
Yeah, as a comedian, I'm succinct. That's a thing.
I repeat myself a lot just to hammer it in.
No, you don't repeat yourself. You're very articulate. But I will say, you lend yourself very well to this format. With me, when I was on TV a lot, as going on as a comedian, everyone else's goal, you have to understand this with cable news. If you're on a panel, your goal is to spend as much time speaking as possible, saying as little as possible, because it's a liability. So say as much. Same thing with a politician. Speak as much as you can with saying as little as you can. Whereas I would go in, I would throw in 3 words because as a comedian, if you can say a joke in 3 words that would originally take 12 words, you go with the 3 words. And I was getting complaints basically from executives going, take the floor a little longer. Can you don't just throw it back to the host. It's uncomfortable. This isn't how we do things.
It's kind of awkward.
I made my point,
Yeah.
But I don't know. And then I just did it where I spoke long and you were going to say something, and now I think you forgot it.
Yeah, I probably did, yeah. Well, it may surprise you to learn that I generally have to be cut off rather than encouraged to speak more. What was I going to say? The IQ thing. Okay, so the way it works, that study may or may not be right about the fact that men have a couple of points over women. Much more interesting and much more significant is the IQ bell curve and the way that IQ is distributed between the sexes. Now, for the most part, broadly speaking, you take a group of men and a group of women, there will be the same amount of IQ in those two groups. But what's interesting about...
Okay, hold on. And I remember it. So I have to stop.
Tell me.
And then just hold that thought.
No, it's fine. I've got it. It's there.
Okay.
I'm holding it.
Did you see that recent poll that showed that the Americans in general, when they were asked what percentage of the population they thought was gay, have you seen that?
Oh, and they said 20, and it's something
about
like
25%.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Well, this is part of a broader. It's part of a broader trend. Basically, people don't know anything. People are absolutely wrong about everything.
Well, and also gay men, I hate to say it, are overly represented in the entertainment industry. You would think it's 25%.
No, we're overly represented everywhere. We're overly represented. I mean, the fact that gay marriage, which affects, what I would say, I don't think it's even 1%. I don't even think it's 1%. Every organization that gives out statistics about the number of gays in society has a vested interest in inflating those numbers.
Right.
Whether it's gay charities or sexual health clinics or whatever, they have an incentive to make, for funding reasons, so that they sound like they're speaking for more people, of making the number of gay people in society as large as possible. When you actually do the censuses, is it 1%? Maybe. Yeah. So the amount of coverage that the gay marriage gets, given that it affects so few people in society, and by the way, there are basically no lesbians. There are almost no lesbians in society. Almost no woman says she's only with women her whole life. And the number of transgender people is even more minuscule. And this is the problem with the left at the moment. They've won all their big battles. Feminism is basically won. Women have everything now. It's great, terrific. That's great for both of us. It's not enough. They have to invent the wage gap. They have to invent microaggressions, mansplaining, man-slamming, man-steering, all this kind of shit.
And it's made me more... I hate to say this. I hate that it's affected me this way, but I was talking with my wife.
It makes you more misogynistic.
It absolutely
makes you
does.
A misogynist.
Because there was
makes you a misogynist.
I grew up, you never, ever, 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 ever hit a woman. And now I see these videos on YouTube where girls are just hitting guys left and right. I'm going...
It would have been unconscionable for me to ever consider hitting a woman when I was growing up. But I see Jessica Valenti on the screen, and don't ever get us in a TV studio together.
But honestly, though, it's open season on men, not only intellectually now, but physically. If you run a search of YouTube, girl hits guy,
and you can't hit them back, and even I can't hit them back. Actually, that's one of the interesting things where the
And I'm not saying you should hit women, by the way. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's changed it.
You shouldn't hit anyone. You shouldn't hit anyone unless they start it. And if they do start it as a man, you kind of just have to take it.
Let's stop the BS. My friends and I hit each other all the time. We're always wrestling guys, and I would never do it with a woman.
I'm always wrestling guys too.
This is true.
But
just avoiding the bears.
Oh, it's fine for a bit of. They're nice to cuddle. No, I mean, lost my thread.
We were talking about that. Well, let's go back to the IQ thing.
Even I can't hit. I mean, not saying I want to, but even I wouldn't get away with hitting a woman being gay, because the male privilege would override the homosexual oppression in that particular case. Normally, I can get away with being outrageous and saying unpleasant things and being controversial. Oh, he's just a faggot. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that, even if she had it coming.
Okay, two things. I want to go back to the IQ, but you just said faggot. Yes. So quick question. What is that in the UK? Is that a hate word in the UK when it still means cigarette, fag?
It's not really a word we use in the UK. I sort of use it comically to so I like to make a joke out of being sort of homophobic homosexual. So it's kind of like a joke that I do. So I just latch onto any sort of derogatory word for homosexual because it annoys the right kind of gay. There's an earnest kind of pearl clutching glad kind of like, how can you say that about your own people? And then of course they accuse you of being self-loathing and all the rest of it. And I find this sort of stuff endlessly funny. So if anybody's offended by that word, I'm sorry, but well, actually no, I'm not. If anyone's offended.
Ironically, that someone would call you self-loathing when the object of your desire is the same genetic equipment you share, which I find funny. But
or just myself. I mean, just me in a mirror. I'm fine.
I always wondered that. I mean, I was like, if I had boobs, I wouldn't make it out of the restroom.
Right? It's really fine.
Okay, so the IQ thing, and then I want to let you go, but you're making an interesting point. Same amount of IQ with the pool of men and women.
Roughly, but the reason that there are sublime male geniuses and knuckle draggers, the reason that there is a male Mozart and Rembrandt and Van Gogh, but no female equivalent, and the reason that men fill the prisons has got nothing to do with race or any longer to do with privilege or anything like that. It's to do with IQ distribution. So if you think of the bell curve,
bell curve, I've seen that chart too, where there are more women in them.
Right. So women cluster around the mean. There's no reason in evolutionary terms for women to have extremes of anything, right? But men are where nature takes its risks. So the graph is shallower. It means fewer men have that mean of 100, and there are more men right at the top and the bottom ends. So as I say, it's a double-edged sword because it means that there are more knuckle dragging.
Well, you get to a point where there are zero female geniuses and a very small number of men left when you actually look at the chart.
Yes, what happens is that all of the subjects that men excel at, the sort of, unfortunately for women, I guess, all of the kind of societies of species-defining accomplishments exist in those. Happen in those disciplines that require very high IQs, and there simply aren't that many women around with a high IQ of above 140, right? So astrophysics, philosophy, mathematics, computer science, all of these subjects are almost exclusively male at college because women drop out or they don't choose to do those subjects, or, as is more often the case, they don't cut the mustard and they don't make the grade. And all of those subjects are the ones that take us to the moon, that give us music, that give us Descartes and Kant and the intellectual history of the West, our scientific and structural societal accomplishments. All of those happen in those very high those disciplines that require very high.
Unfortunately, for men, the day-to-day process of education and jobs lends itself much better to women. Men don't tend to do as well in public education.
No, exactly, because all of the tools of assessment are geared towards girls. We now go for coursework instead of exams because girls are better at it. We do soft skills instead of hard facts and knowledge because girls are better at that stuff, which is why now more women go to university, more women graduate from university, women getting higher grades at both high school and university. And it's also ultimately the reason why under the age of 30, the UK and the US, women get paid more than men for the same work, because they have a broader range of skills, including being able to sell themselves and communicative skills, no matter what discipline they're in, to negotiate for higher wages. And also, of course, all of that sort of structural inbuilt advantage that women have now, as we learned the other day, in at least one STEM, at least one STEM subject, women have a 2-to-1 inbuilt advantage against men, all else being equal, solely by virtue of being women, because everybody is desperate to hire women for the sake of hiring women.
Right.
So now women have a 2-to-1 advantage in men in some of these in job applications. This is what boys are talking about when they say, maybe not men our age. This is what boys are talking about when they say they feel like society is engineered against them. Because yes, it's true that historically speaking, women did have a lot of structural obstacles to overcome if they wanted to do as well as a man. But that isn't the case anymore. Yet we insist on gerrymandering things to appeal to one sex or the other. At the moment, the pendulum has swung quite far in the other direction,
right.
And we're discovering, we're learning, is that boys of 20 who are not responsible for the sins of their fathers, but who, feminists want to sort of this is another way feminists are just like the religious right. It's the doctrine of original sin. They want to punish these 20-year-old boys for the sins of their forefathers, and disadvantage them academically by structuring, by engineering the whole system in favor of girls. I mean, that's not fair on these young kids. And that's what young men are talking about when they get very angry online sometimes. They sort of act out. They use very, very frothy and energetic language. They get boisterous,
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. That's what they mean. They go through school where 1 in 7 of them is on Ritalin because they've been held up to feminine standards of beauty. They get to university and there are dozens of programs for women and nothing for them. And the women are all doing better and getting better grades, and they can't understand why. They don't know it's because the marking criteria are all geared towards the way that women learn and how women perform better. And then they get into the workplace and they have to work twice as hard to get the same job as a woman does just because they have a penis. I mean, those are the sorts of real structural advantages that women complained about for 100 years. They don't understand, or they don't care, maybe, about the unfairness of flipping that on its head very quickly in the space of 1 generation, so that men now have all of those disadvantages and women have very few of them. And that's one of the reasons why I write the sort of stuff that I do, because I find that pretty horrific.
I blame the big fat CEO bonuses at the fragrance counters. I think you're onto something.
It's Estee Lauder.
Yes, it is Estee Lauder and Clinique's fault.
Estee Lauder.
Thank you, Milo. We won't keep you anymore because I know you've got to go. But hey, like I said, you wanted to go long. This goes online. We'll have to cut this up. It'll be like 5 hours. But you have to come back. We'll have you knock some sense in the fun dip, and then we'll see what happens.
Terrific. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Hi, is this... It's still Milo's channel, but I'm over at my channel at youtube.com/Steven Crowder, where I just said .com because it's 1996 http:/:. Go click there where you can watch the full interview and see more videos that have angered the social justice warriors and feminists. So do likewise and be merry.